The American Revolution, one of the most important and influential wars America has ever taken part in. We all learn about it from our elementary school interpretations up to our college courses. But what caused this major event in American history to occur? While taxes by the British government were rising and spreading on many items quickly, it seemed to the colonists that the only way to stop it was to rebel. So, one cold December evening, a group of brave men dumped a ship full of British tea into the Boston harbor, which the British felt was the final straw. While they might not have meant it to be, this great act of rebellion to the British tyranny was a catalyst for a full-on revolution, which created the definition of democracy America stands by today. The British Empire was, at the time, the largest empire in the entire world. The colonists were still under the rule of the king, therefore, the future of New England was still at the mercy of the king and Parliament. When British fought the French-Indian War, sending armies to fight in New England was certainly expensive. So naturally, when the war was over, the British had to find the money to pay off the debt for the war. They found they could make the most money from taxing the colonists. The act that started it all was the Sugar Act. This taxed merchants for any sugar and molasses they imported from England. This caused the colonists to question their effect on their own fate, and it fueled James Otis's famous quote, "No taxation without representation." Then, the Stamp Act of 1765 no longer targeted only merchants, but was a universal hit, as it taxed all paper products. Though the act was later repealed, the Townshend Acts followed in 1767 and made a worse impression on the colonists. Townshend Acts taxed all imported goods including glass, paint, lead, paper, and of course, tea. The colonists reacted with the Non-Importation Agreement. This meant the colonists would not buy or sell British goods. That year, the sales to the colonies dropped 110%, and the East Indian Trading Company was on the verge of failure. This greatly increased the tension between the colonies and the British. The tax on the tea was at an all-time high, which encouraged smuggling within the colonies. The East India Trading Company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Britain needed to rebuild their economy, and fast. So, Lord North passed the Tea Act of 1773. This brought the price of tea at an all-time low. Merchants, who were the wealthy class in the colonies, took a direct hit, and the Committee of Correspondence was worried about the other ramifications it would have on the colonies. Tea was the ultimate sign of tyranny to the colonists, and the tension was building up from the numerous taxes placed on them. So, the committee devised a plan to show the British what they were capable of. So one faithful night in December, a group of men dressed up like Indians went aboard 3 British ships and dumped over 10,000 pounds of tea into the Boston harbor. The British were absolutely furious and demanded that the colonists be punished. This fueled the release of the Intolerable or Coercive Acts, for which caused a major uproar within the colonies. The colonists decided they would not take any more of the British oppression, and a revolution was starting to form. Without the fearless and brazen acts that we now refer to as the Boston Tea Party, the Intolerable Acts would have never been written, and it is possible that the colonists would have never received the final blow that made them revolt. The Boston Tea Party was the first true sign of organized and unrelenting rebellion, which the British feared from the colonists, and therefore a revolution was in place. The American Revolution was a battle for freedom and created the definition of democracy, an idea that, while ever-changing, stays as a concrete right in American government today. Before the Revolution, the Americans were still under the rule of the king and at the mercy of the Parliament's rulings. By no definition were they living in a democracy. Once the Revolution was over and the colonists truly became Americans, our democratic republic started to form. The Constitution was written, and in that, gave the Americans the right to vote. This statute for democracy was one of the reasons why Americans believed the Revolution to be successful. Although, democracy is an ongoing process which Americans have fought over for centuries. The right to vote was given to rich white men. African Americans were not given the legal right to vote until 1850, almost 70 years after the war ended. Women were not given the right to vote until 1920, almost 140 years after the war ended. Colonists tried to escape the British monarchy and Parliament, but for 70 years, the rich white male population voted and therefore made the most decisions, very much like the Parliament they came to despise. So, in a way, the war created the definition of democracy, but modern history has and will continue to challenge and change the original definition. Although we won political and geographical freedom with Britain, our main objective was to defeat the oppressive wealthy king and define our own country. But, just because we don't have a monarchy doesn't mean we don't have a clear and generally exclusive hierarchy. Over the centuries, people of all different classes, races, and social views have fought for the same rights and privileges as those who are at the top of the social chain. The only people who truly gained democracy after the Revolution was fought were wealthy white men. The low and middle class to this day are still struggling to thrive under the rule of our country's holders of wealth. The hierarchy of America is similar to that of the monarchy we were under before the Revolution. They both oppress the middle and lower class. We are still to this day fighting the taxes our government issues to us. We are still in the fight on taxes to this very day. Freedom was the main objective to the colonists. The American Revolution was a battle that was essential to fight for the formation of our country. The Boston Tea Party's brazen spectacle of rebellion, which John Adams said was so bold, so daring, so firm, intrepid, and inflexible, it must have so important consequences and so lasting that I can't but consider it an epocha in history, proved to be a major catalyst for a fight for freedom and creating democracy in America. When America won that freedom, naturally we struggled to find the perfect way of distributing it. But, over the past 235 years, we have come a long way to perfect the definition of democracy and keep our country economically, politically, and socially strong.